Good evening everyone. Welcome to Unacademy, the one-stop destination for the civil services English medium aspirants. Welcome to an initiative called Ethics Simplified. We meet every single week in order to discuss underlying ethical issues associated with current affairs. Now please note, sometimes the current affairs itself becomes a theme, and sometimes those current affairs, at least for GS paper 4, is a trigger. That trigger makes the underlying theme very important from the ethical standpoint as well. So what was the trigger for environmental ethics to be discussed? Of course, the trigger was the recently held COP30, that means Conference of the Parties, the 30th edition of UNFCCC, and the negotiations that were happening in the country Brazil. So in that context, not just environment from the environment GS3 point of view and geography point of view, but environmental ethics as a topic becomes very evergreen and something that will always be relevant and in fact can anytime be asked by UPSC. So let's dive into this and discuss this in a lot amount of detail. But before we do, an important announcement. Now, what is it that is held on 23rd of November? The only difference being, I totally understand that you can probably practice tests at home. You can test your knowledge for prelims based on the MCQs that you practice in various test series. The one factor that sets UCSC apart from the others is that you need some tests that will not just help you in practicing MCQs, but will give you an idea about where you stand on an all India basis. Based on the data of our previous scholarship tests, we have analyzed that lots and lots of students from across the country who are your true competitors are writing this UCSC that is going to be held on 23rd of November. This gives you a very good chance to compete, analyze and check where do you stand on an all India basis. Depending on that, you can tweak your strategy, you can change the way you study and you can identify gaps in MCQ based questions as well. Whether it is a memory problem, whether it is a MCQ based attempting problem, it is the range problem, anything can be used. So I absolutely urge you to attempt this test on the 23rd of November at 11 AM and 5 PM and sit down with it and evaluate. The questions, I promise, are going to be absolutely along the lines of UPSC papers. Therefore, please note the date, and of course the registration link is provided in the description box. It is absolutely free for everyone to attempt, so make very good use of this opportunity. Now let's move into our topic. Now, as I always say and I commit, I will never teach a topic until and unless A, it is related to the syllabus, and B, it has been asked previously by UPSC in some manner or the other. The best validation of the same is the fact that this kind of a question was asked in GS paper 4 in 2015. A very direct question associated with environmental ethics, simply asking what is meant by environmental ethics. You will describe it, you will give the features associated with it. Why is it important to study? The role of it, and in that you will talk about the aggressive development without the concern of ecology, the dilemma between development and conservation, etc. That is why it is very important to study. The glaring facts in front of us by IPCC reports, etc. That is basically showcasing that we are at crossroads. We need to take a decision now in terms of where we are headed as a planet, as a collective responsibility. Discuss any one environmental issue from the viewpoint of environmental ethics. It can be anything. It could be associated with dams and the impact on rivers. It could be the impact on infrastructure, road and on rivers. It could be the impact on the use of fossil fuel for economic growth and the impact on air pollution, or whether it is the impact of what you call as stubble burning or any cultural factors, for example, the crackers associated with Diwali on the poor air quality and AQI based struggles. It could be absolutely anything. So therefore, this is an easy question asked in 2015 because there have been many years. There can be a dedicated focus again. In fact, the focus remains. Why do I say this? Please note, in 2025 GS4 mains paper, they asked a theory based question directly on the need for balancing national security on the one hand versus ecology of fragile ecosystems on the other hand. Again, a dilemma that associates environment in some way. So therefore, this is a recurrent theme, an evergreen theme. Absolutely, it is important for us to prepare. Why? Because UPSC is tired of asking questions based on definitions alone. They know we all mug it up. We have pure examples ready. They are checking your knowledge in a field called applied ethics. And environmental ethics is a classic area and domain of applied ethics. Now, let's move and discuss this. Now, introduction ideas. Introduction should always have some spark of current affairs in order to tell the examiner that I don't just do bookish knowledge, but I'm reading newspapers and I can relate my bookish theory based knowledge to what is happening in the world. For instance, I will give you an example. In the earlier series which were discussed that are called the Conference of Parties, in which we discuss how we are proceeding in terms of UNFCCC negotiations, as well as now the Paris Agreement or the Paris Climate Deal negotiations. Therefore, Conference of Parties are held, and the recent Conference of Party was held in Brazil in what is called as COP30. Wonderful. So in this context, there was a initiative or a need to take stock of how the countries are standing by on the promises that they have made. Basically, a review had to be taken up, and that review is called the Global Stocktake. What is a stocktake? You check whether progress has been made. You check how far you have come in terms of your commitments, and you check where we are standing as a planet. Are we on the right track to limit the temperature according to what we had set as a target or not? Or are we lagging behind in this trajectory? That is a stocktake. In COP30 that was held in Brazil, a new term was and a new initiative was added. This initiative is called Global Ethical Stocktake. Just the addition of this word ethical signifies a lot more than what it appears. Basically, and there was also a World Wildlife Fund WWF article that talks about the fact that in this process of the Paris Agreement signed in 2015 to a decade of the Paris Agreement, that means in 2025, in this decade there have been multiple declarations by the countries in the form of nationally determined contribution, NDCs. They have set up very, very ambitious targets, but there is a huge gap between what is promised and what is implemented. And this gap, according to the author of the WWF article as well as the other leaders in COP30, have said that this gap showcases a commitment issue. This gap showcases a responsibility issue. This gap showcases a solidarity issue. And this gap showcases the lack of stewardship towards the environment issue. And therefore, it is not that countries cannot implement it, but the issue is ethical. Are we seeing this as a climate problem? Just as a climate problem, temperature 2.5, temperature 1.5, 2 degrees. Or are we seeing this as an ethical issue which is talking about our responsibility towards the environment, our responsibility towards those vulnerable countries that are at the ends of the disproportionate burden of climate change. For example, small island developing nations. So this is not just the global ethical stocktake showcases that this kind of a gap can only be filled with responsibility, with solidarity, by understanding that this is not just a climatic issue, but it is an ethical or a moral issue that needs to be worked on. That is why the global ethical stocktake. We also hear about, for example, the private sector. UPSC had also asked this word in prelims as well. The private sector is often claiming that these products are environmentally friendly. These are our practices that are very good for ecology. But a lot of those claims are in fact false. And a term that is very popular is called greenwashing. Again, increasing the emphasis on the fact that are we just doing it out of obligation in terms of numbers? Do we just see this as a climate crisis? Or do we see it as a crisis associated with justice, associated with moral responsibility, solidarity and responsibility? All these factors require the ethical considerations of these climate negotiations. Wonderful. So in this context, let's look at this, the introductions associated with it. COP30, Conference of Party 30, has again, and please note, which is why I said it's an evergreen topic. Every time a Conference of Party is going to happen, and it will keep happening, environmental related ethics are going to be in use. It has brought environmental ethics to the forefront, exposing the moral fractures. That means we've still not taken moral responsibility. We are still fighting A versus B. We are still shunning the responsibility from our own shoulders. So this showcases the moral fractures between those responsible for crisis, for example, the global north, and that is why climate negotiations have been divided in global north and global south. Those that are responsible for historical emissions versus those who are suffering the most, the global south. So not just a climate problem, but a problem showcasing injustice is something that we will talk about. Please note, in order to showcase the emergency, in order to showcase the problem that is so tragic, you will say earlier there were protests associated with increasing crime rates. There were protests associated with better wages. There were protests associated with certain laws that had to be taken back, farm laws, etc. But imagine in our country, we are protesting for something as vital as clean air. AQI related protests in New Delhi. AQI related protests in New Delhi showcasing the problem of air pollution and the issue associated with higher emissions. So WHO estimates that, leave aside other factors associated with death, 7 million annual deaths happen from air pollution. Something as vital as clean air is not provided. Environmental ethics therefore becomes central to public welfare and the idea of justice. Should people be denied something as vital as clean air? As the earth trembles, now this can be a poetic introduction, you can use any of the two if this is not what works for you. As the earth trembles under the weight of human greed, that means we have only focused on our materialistic ambitions, economic growth. We have started looking at a planet and thinking that how will our action impact everyone? But it is the compounded impact of everyone's action that of course affects the planet. So the earth is trembling under the weight of human greed. Environmental ethics becomes the soul of what should define our collective conscience in the years to come. Collective conscience is collectively we should understand there has to be a voice within that tells you we are going on the right way or not. And that should be defined by environmental ethics and environmental ethical values. Great. Let's move to the issues now. Environmental ethics, the first issue associated with environmental ethics, so the principle under environmental ethics of what is right for the environment point of view is the idea of intergenerational equity. Now, intergenerational equity simply means that the way you are using your resources today should be in a way that you are mindful that those resources are available for the future generations. The way you are adding to any kind of polluting industries today, you should be mindful about the impact that it will have on future generations. Intergenerational equity. Equity is that they should also, their consideration should also be a part of how you use a resource today. For example, when we see multiple countries, for example, the IT hub of India, even Bengaluru, suffered from a major water scarcity crisis. People did not have something as vital as water. Because of the tube well culture that is now in each and every household, there is over extraction of groundwater, and therefore we see that in areas of Punjab and Haryana, long-term water scarcity is at a big risk. Why? Because of the excessive overuse and groundwater extraction. In fact, most of the districts, 50% of the districts by 2050 will be severely water stressed. That becomes a violation of this principle, a violation of this feature of environmental ethics. We are putting the future generations at a severe disadvantage because of our actions today. Next, intrinsic value of nature. Now, this basically means you have two ways. One, you value humans for the fact that they are humans, or you value a human being because that human being is used by you for achieving a significant end. That person has any form of utility for you. It is because of that you value that person. Similarly, intrinsic value of nature means that you are not valuing nature just because it provides you with some ecosystem services. You are not valuing nature just because it is providing you with resources, with forests, with timber, with fossil fuels, with minerals, with ecosystem services, with the rainfall, with pollution regulating features, by ensuring that emissions are absorbed, carbon sequestration. You are not valuing nature because it is providing you with something. You are not using it as a means to an end. The idea under environmental ethics is environment, the pristine environment and ecology should themselves be considered as the end in itself. You should not have a selfish relationship with the environment where you say that I will only preserve or value or give dignity to any kind of environmental health related arguments or debate if it provides me for something. That is what is the second value in environmental ethics, intrinsic value of nature. Value in itself, not because it acts as a means for human beings and provides services. For example, a very big example of this kind of a relationship is not probably that we have with the environment, but it is showcased by tribals and tribal communities. You would see that tribal communities live in such good sync with the environment that they in fact preserve certain forests. They worship those forests in the form of sacred groves. So these sacred groves are an example of giving intrinsic value and importance to nature. So tribal sacred groves, tribal communities believe in the intrinsic values of forests, viewing them as sacred and worthy of protection. The Ambi Valley projects, etc., or these towns, this township has also destroyed a lot of forested region in the Western Ghats, a violation of the intrinsic value. Next. Now, this is also a very important part of environmental ethics. The idea of justice associated with environment. What does this mean? This means few things. Environmental justice. I'll give you an example. For example, in the area of Delhi NCR, despite the fact that most of the car users are from the elite sections, in fact, if you see the Noida, Greater Noida Expressway, the expressway from Gurgaon to Delhi NCR, etc., in the evening, in the mornings, you'll probably see one car and one driver. And imagine the kind of carbon footprint, imagine the kind of carbon emissions that they are contributing to. The elite sections predominantly contributing to this kind of an environmental problem in Delhi NCR. But the moment they step into their houses, they can switch on what is called as their air purifiers. Imagine the impact of these actions on the poor and vulnerable sections that are maybe living in slums, not closed proper housing, under footpaths and bridges, certain vulnerable sections, for example, elderly with respiratory problems, and how fatal it can be for them to walk in this air. What did you see here? The first problem was that your action or any kind of action has a disproportionate impact. Disproportionate means more impact on one section and less on you who are the pollutant. Disproportionate impact on vulnerable sections. This kind of a situation becomes unfair. And this unfair part is part of environmental justice as well. So the first part of environmental justice is that climate related burden or climate related disadvantage should not be only on one section that have an affordability problem. This goes against the idea of climate justice. This is the same example globally. That means globally when we see the global north has been historically responsible for emissions, and it is not them who are suffering due to the worst impacts of climate change, but it is the small island developing countries that are suffering because of their action in the form of sea level rise. Is this unfair? Does this go against the idea of justice? Absolutely yes. So this is the first part of environmental justice. The second part is that everyone should have equal access to clean environment, that means clean air, clean water, clean ecosystem services. Equal access. This access should not be on the basis of purchasing power or affordability. Something as vital as environment or the ecosystem services of the environment should be available to all and no one should be left behind. The third part of environmental justice is that tomorrow if you're taking up any step, any decision, for example, to allow a dam to be constructed here, an infrastructure project to come here, a special economic zone to be created here, a terminal or a container port to be established here. In that context, decision making should not be from Delhi NCR, from the capital regions. It should not be from bureaucratic decision making. Rather, decision making should be inclusive. Decision making should in fact have first the say of those who are impacted. For example, clearance required by the Gram Sabha in the environment impact assessment rules. That becomes the decision making. So, inclusive decision making associated with the decisions regard to environment is the third feature of environmental justice as well. Now, let's read this. Fair distribution of environmental burden. That means if there is a disadvantage associated with environment, that should be borne by every community, not by only one community. So, should bear disproportionate. No one should bear disproportionate impact on pollution, toxic waste or climate impact, which is right now being done in the context of small island developing countries. Second, equal access to environmental benefits. It is not just the privileged that can park themselves in homes with air purifiers. Those only should get good and clean air. This should be the right given to every single person. And last, inclusive decision making. Everyone should have a say in terms of how they are going to be impacting and if they are consenting to this project or not. Example being SIIDs, we've discussed this. Local residents, there was a lot of protest in Pithampur associated with the dumping of the Union Carbide plant waste that was still considered by a lot of people to be toxic, and therefore people in Pithampur protested against this. And they said that this is against environmental justice. Of course, the idea of CBDR, common but differentiated responsibility, where developing countries say, since we have not emitted as much as you have emitted in the past, we are still in the process of industrializing, you have industrialized enough. So, yes, we agree that we have a common responsibility. Even we should hold your hands in terms of climate change efforts, but we should have differentiated responsibility, lesser responsibility. Our phasing out targets should be easier, should give us the time, and you as the person responsible for polluting historically should also help us with what is called as climate finance. So, common but differentiated responsibility also part of environmental justice. Great. Next, principle of polluter pays. Now, polluter pays principle is very, very important. For example, the idea that if there is a company that has created some amount of pollution, the idea is not to completely overlook this and realize whatever is done is done. No, if your actions has led to some form of pollution, you should be penalized for it and you should pay for the damage that you have created in order to use it as compensation. So, the Baku-Belem roadmap aims to mobilize climate finance. Climate finance is also on the idea that polluter pays. Which polluter? That polluter that has historically led to emissions. The globalized north or the industrialized developed countries. So, the Baku-Belem roadmap is also about the transfer of International Climate Fund associated with $1.3 billion by 2035. Next, for example, have you seen multiple cases in which National Green Tribunals, NGT, has often slapped fine on certain companies for the pollution that they've created? This is also on the idea of polluter pays. For example, have you heard about the Compensatory Afforestation Management Fund? The CAMPA funds are also based on this fact that if you have led to deforestation in some way, you compensate for that deforestation in the form of CAMPA funds. So a lot of times NHAI was ordered to pay multiple crores for failing to control dust and comply with compensatory afforestation norms. Multiple times the NGT has slapped this fine also on multiple industries and concerns. Next, stewardship. The idea of stewardship is the idea that we do not look at the earth as owners of the earth. We do not look at our relationship with the planet in the form of the fact that we have no responsibility towards it. We do not see it as a relationship where we have all the rights to exploit it for the time being that we are on the planet. This should not be the case. So not looking at yourself and your relationship with the planet as an owner relationship that can be exploited, rather as a caretaker that is responsible for the environment we leave behind for the next generations. Which is why the concept of stewardship, of caring for the environment, caring for the planet, basically talks about being cautionary, being very cautious and ensuring that even if some kind of damage has been done, we take up certain norms and regulations so that more damage is not done. For example, the eco-sensitive zones, declaring certain ecological areas as eco-sensitive zones and trying to limit the kind of development that happens here. Why? Because they are very fragile. For example, Western Ghats as well. For example, the mountainous regions, Western Ghats, etc. Example, according to Reuters, India reached 50%. Now, this example of India achieving its target or commitment to the Paris climate deal much earlier than what we were required to showcases that we are showcasing stewardship in climate change negotiations. India reached 50% non-fossil electricity capacity much ahead of its 2030 target, showcasing our pure commitment and responsibility towards clean transition. Another very popular mission called Lifestyle for Environment, Mission Life, has also been popularized by the Prime Minister. This is also not just a country showcasing caretaker behavior, but every citizen in their own lifestyle every single day. When it comes to closing the tap, switching on off your engines, when it comes to a traffic signal, anything, you are showcasing your responsibility in Mission Life. Next. This is a very important concept. Now, when we are talking about environmental ethics, environment also encompasses other biodiversity. That means environmental protection is very closely linked to biodiversity conservation. Biodiversity conservation alone cannot happen till the time environmental conservation is not happening. So therefore, one of the subsets under environmental ethics is also to change the way human beings look at their relationship with the environment by considering the existence of all life. Bio means life, all life. What is the case right now? Human beings feel that if this is the environment, we are at the center of decision making. When we look at our relationship with the environment, we do not have to consider the impact on anything else. We assume that our relationship with the environment should only be based on the fact that if it leads to our benefit or not. If that decision leads to your benefit, human beings will do it. That means in the decision making process, humans centered themselves, made them the center of the universe, and said that whatever, any decision is a right decision as long as it benefits us. We will not look at any other externalities, we will not look at any other impact. Biocentrism means you are not just centering humans in the decision making process and the considerations, but you are also looking at all life forms. Biocentrism means this planet is not only for humans, but it is for all life forms. And therefore, when humans are making their decision, in this area of consideration, they should have the impact on them as well as on the environment as well as on all bioforms. Biocentrism. Clear? So, every creature counts and matters. For example, when we spoke about and when we are taking up this river linking project, the Ken-Betwa river linking project, it is of course beneficial for water scarcity of the region, for water security of the region, etc. That means yes, the Ken-Betwa river linking project is beneficial for the human beings. But it has two negative externalities. What are the two negative externalities? The first, submergence of Panna Tiger Reserve. Submergence of an ecologically important area, that is a forested area. So, environmental impact. And the second is, if this submergence will happen, it will lead to the destruction of various wildlife corridors and therefore will impact the biodiversity of that region as well. What did we do when we took this decision? We were going against the idea of biocentrism. We did not evaluate our impact on other life. Use of integrated pest management. Now, this is a good example. A lot of times now, integrated pest management is being promoted as a good strategy, as a good process. Why? We do not need harmful pesticides for complete pest removal. Using biopesticides, we can manage their population at a sustainable level. This is an example of biocentrism. 6. Strict provisions against the transfer of invasive species. Now, with invasive species, if invasive species are transferred from one area to another, they can completely displace the original species and threaten biodiversity. So, it is for the humans to ensure that our actions, our movement of ships, flora, fauna, etc. is not leading to this transfer of invasive species. We are not interfering with their competition. We are not introducing new species. So, this becomes biocentrism. Sustainability, of course, as you would know, is the mix of two objectives. One, we understand we need developmental growth. It should definitely be pursued. But at the same time, it should be pursued with cleaner options. For example, renewable energy. Which is why we see India's push. India is not saying that we do not have development goals. We don't want to become a developed nation by 2047. We absolutely have them in place. But the way we will achieve them will be more sustainable. That can be continued for years and years. So, the Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana associated with solar power becomes an example. We are ensuring that yes, in some areas we will clear forests for development projects. But how will we make this sustainable? By ensuring that proper afforestation or compensatory afforestation is done side by side, so that the total carbon sequestration is not impacted. We do need energy needs, yes, but now our energy needs are slowly going to move from diesel and petrol vehicles to biofuels and also to now electric vehicles. So, this becomes the sustainability examples that we will give. Next is the precautionary principle under environmental ethics. Precautionary principle is that whenever you are taking a decision that this development project, this highway, this container port, this special economic zone, anything can create a bad impact on the ecology of the place. Even a possibility of a bad impact if it creates, don't go ahead with that project. Take precaution. That means don't say that we will do it first and whatever negative impact it is creating, we will deal with it later. That is not the case. Precautionary principle is that even if there is a chance of a negative externality on the environment, do not proceed with that project. So multiple ecological impact study, take up various datas, do multiple studies, analyze the possible impact in every possible way comprehensively before introducing, for example, genetically modified crops. Which is why you would see that no genetically modified food crop has been given permission to be introduced commercially. We have BT cotton, which is a non-food crop per se, that has only been given the permission. And therefore, there are various ecological studies that are being made before GEAC gives permission for the introduction of GM crops. Why? On the basis of precaution. We need to be absolutely sure of all the possible impacts that it could have on the environment, on biodiversity. Precautionary principle. Even when we talked about the Environment Impact Assessment, the Environment Impact Assessment Act as well as the rules were amended, and after the amendment, the Supreme Court struck down some parts of it. Some parts of the Environment Impact Assessment said that if there is a project, we will give permission for it, and whatever damage it has created, we will put a penalty. Therefore, ruled that granting ex post facto environmental clearance, the Supreme Court said, is unconstitutional. That means, retrospectively, after the project has been made, then you give it the approval, ex post facto. That is wrong according to the Supreme Court. Why? Because you are retrospectively, in the reverse manner, you are trying to understand the impact it has created when the impact is already done. So this after the project completion clearance is not a good idea, and that is what the Supreme Court had struck down. Again, upholding the precautionary principle. Interconnectedness and interdependence, as we had discussed earlier. Environment is connected to animal health, and animal health is also very closely connected to human health. The idea of One Health approach is associated with the interconnectedness. That means it is not just a moral imperative for us to act in favor of the environment. In fact, acting in favor of the environment is also a selfish act. Why? Because of the interconnectedness. For example, biomagnification. Persistent organic pollutants, for example, mercury, are also biomagnifying in certain animals as well as human beings. So the problem of pollution and biomagnification associated with species is also an interconnected issue. Next, global responsibility. As we said, environmental ethics is based on the fact that environment recognizes no borders that we have physically created. An air that is polluted in India will also be shared with the air that is polluted in Pakistan. And therefore, pollution knows of no boundary, climate change impact knows of no boundaries.